Hello everyone. Hi chat, how's it going? Welcome to Demo Days. Hello to folks from Serbia. Hello to folks from India. Hello from all over the world. I see you all. Valencia, I see Lebanon, I see Germany, Brazil. I see France, I see more India. Hello, nice to see everyone. Another busy Friday. I hope you're doing okay wherever you are in the world. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. Last Friday, we introduced an idea of InnerSource and how it both learns from open source as well as is distinct from open source itself. Today, we're going to zoom in on discoverability and why it's a particularly relevant challenge for any InnerSource effort. I'd like to introduce our guest for today, Matt Desmond, a solutions engineer, and Chris McIntosh, DevOps engineer
Hello.
here at GitHub. Hello, welcome, gentlemen.
Yeah, how's it
Also,
going?
if you are watching this and think that your organization would benefit from a private demo or walkthrough of your specific use case, feel free to use the QR code in the corner to book a meeting with us. With that said, Matt and Chris, take it away, please.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, like AJ said, this is a follow-on to the great stream that we had last week talking about what is InnerSource. So with us today, we've got Matt Desmond here, a solutions engineer from GitHub Professional Services, and myself, a DevOps engineer, also with GitHub Professional Services. We're going to be recapping kind of what makes InnerSource successful, kind of the great presentation last week. From there, we're going to define what the discoverability problem is so that we're all on the same page. And then we're going to talk about how we can solve that problem and how promoting contributions kind of helps solve that problem. So what makes InnerSource successful? Creating a culture of sharing is kind of the prime candidate for making a successful InnerSource switch. Making sure that your organization as a whole knows that you value contributing to each other's source code and borrowing code from each other. Preventing code reuse where possible and sharing ideas with each other. And that is often like the hardest barrier to overcome. After that, getting an executive sponsor. If you do not have top-down support for creating your InnerSource push, then it is likely dead in the water and it won't get very far as priorities shift and other things come up. Determining a clear message, kind of figuring out what this InnerSource push and your organization is going to be and how it's going to work. Making sure that everyone involved and everyone evangelizing it is on the same page is an important step. And this InnerSource Commons link here that they shared last week is a great resource. It talks about communities of practice and all sorts of things. I believe we will be going back here later today in the deck as well. Determining what success is for your organization and how to track it is important. So figuring out what InnerSource at your organization is going to look like and how you will know that you're successful and how you will know how to iterate on that success so you can improve it further. And I think this is the link from last week, I believe. From the conversation last week. So this should talk about what they went through in the one last week. So what is the problem? InnerSource discoverability. Finding new projects is hard. If you are at a large organization with hundreds or thousands of repositories, how do you know which is the right repository or the right project to look at to find if your solution, if what you're doing has already been done? The larger the organization, the harder it is. If your organization has a history of doing things in private, like many of our organizations do, this makes it more difficult. That goes back to creating that culture of sharing. So today we're going to talk about how you can find new projects, how you can kind of encourage that culture of sharing so that your InnerSource push is going to be successful. So how can we solve this problem? How can we get our developers and everyone else at the company talking to each other and using each other's source code and documentation? To start with, we want to talk about something as basic as repo visibility. So many times in your organization, when you create a new repository, you're going to default to creating it as private. There are many historical reasons why this often happens, but one of the first steps you can do is just change your default repository visibility in your organization and say, we want everything in our organization to be internal by default unless there's a real need for it to be private and secret. Or potentially, if that is not quite the right solution for your organization, since, of course, one size does not fit everybody, then perhaps taking a team-based approach and saying, everyone within this team or this business unit, everything they create, everyone should be able to see. That way, everyone working on the same sorts of things can kind of see how everyone else is solving these problems. And like I mentioned, this doesn't mean that everything has to be open. Even at GitHub here, there are many repositories that I don't even know exist because they potentially have secret data in them, although you shouldn't be keeping secret data in source code generally, or for various other reasons. So you don't need to have every single repository open to your teams, but changing that default visibility to kind of encourage everyone to open things up to each other. And that is a very large hurdle to cross at first, letting your team or the world know how you write code, letting everyone see your blemishes as you write bugs and fix them is kind of a scary thing to do at first, but it is a very good first step.
Yeah, and just to add on to the repo visibility piece, when we're talking about base permissions, we're talking at the enterprise or the organization level within your GitHub Enterprise Server or GitHub Enterprise Cloud, where you're actually able to identify what the base permissions are for every user within the instance. That way, they can either have like a read, so they have access to all of the public and internal repositories within your organization or organizations, or you could set it to write. You could also, as Chris mentioned, you could go with the team approach, or maybe you have something like an all GitHub users, and then maybe even just like specific business silos or business units, and then being able to provide access to repositories based on what teams they're in. It just makes it a lot easier for people to find repositories across like your larger organizations. And even if you're a smaller organization, people start creating repositories either to test things out, or as new projects come up, the number of repositories that your orgs might have starts to scale pretty quickly as you start getting work done.
Yeah, definitely. All right, and next we'll talk about some features that GitHub has in the repositories themselves that kind of can help individuals or teams understand what your repository is, like how your project solves things. These would be the description, the topic, and the topics. So if we look at, clicked it twice, if we look at Adam's about section and their topics down here, we can see we've got a very short description here, the hackable text editor. So we know immediately that this project is going to be something that will let us write text to the screen. And if we see the topics that they've added down here at the bottom, we have, what is that, 7 different topics that this could fall under. Since Atom is an Electron app, it's there. Electron's written in JavaScript, that's there, et cetera, et cetera. And if we look at Visual Studio Codes, it is very similar. The description here could probably use a bit more descriptive bits to it. But again, it has the topics down here and a link to the web page that can help you get more information.
Another thing to think about when you're using, say, repository descriptions or repository topics as well is if your project started with, say, like a code name. For example, there are different features that have been worked on at GitHub that have had different names. One that comes to mind is like Team Rainbow Skate worked on the suggested changes feature within GitHub pull requests. So that initial repo was started as Rainbow Skate. That doesn't necessarily translate long-term to like a description of what that actually does. So they changed the repository name to something along the lines of like suggested changes, and then the description matched that. But within like the topics of that specific repository, they were able to add Rainbow Skate as one of the topics. That way, if someone remembered that that feature was shipped as Rainbow Skate, but didn't remember what it was actually for or what it was actually doing, they'd still be able to find it. So by modifying either the description of the repository or the topic, you're just providing other avenues for the search results to find repositories within your organizations, again, leading to like greater discoverability of the different features and functions and apps and whatever else you're working on within your organizations.
And one thing you mentioned, you can rename repositories if the scope changes, if what it's doing is changing slightly to be more broad. And the same goes with descriptions and topics out here. They can all be edited as your projects evolve and make more sense. So next we want to talk about communities of practice. So if you're not familiar with a community of practice, it is a group or a meeting of like-minded individuals that discuss and evangelize their topic. So in this case, we're talking about a InnerSource community of practice. So it would be your initial group of stakeholders that are eager to get InnerSource set up and going within your organizations. If you go to opensource.com, and we'll link this here in chat, it is a great place to help you get started. But the bullet points from those blogs is basically you want to find a sponsor. So again, similar to how your community of practice how your InnerSource push works. So you want to have support from like the executive level, if that makes sense to your organization, because while this will provide benefits down the road, you will need to spend time doing it, and you need to get support to spend that time, or else it won't go anywhere. Next, you have to determine a clear mission for your community of practice. So InnerSource itself is quite broad. So picking kind of your goals for your community of practice so that you can figure out, again, what success criteria is and how you're going to push forward this effort inside your organization. So perhaps the mission could be to set up an InnerSource portal so that everyone in your organization has one spot to go investigate what projects are out there. Next, you need to build your team, and perhaps these two could be interchangeable, which comes first. But basically, you need to find the people that are really engaged and eager to see this through, and work with them to get this set up. So you want to find a core group of individuals that are wanting to see InnerSource and help the company or the organization and get them to work together. The next one, select your document source. So wherever you are storing documentation, whether that is in markdown files in a repository or any of the other third-party software, you want to make sure that everyone is writing the consistent documentation in one spot and linking everyone to that same spot so that everyone knows where to go to get information about the community of practice. And finally, communicate. So open up your Slack or Teams or whatever chat channels and make sure that people know you're available. And make sure that you're not just talking to the people that are super engaged, right? So make sure you're advertising your community of practice meetings with other channels. Don't spam everyone, but letting people know that your community of practice is out there and eager to help people get started with this InnerSource thing is a great way of getting more more people involved and more projects opened up for the organization.
Yeah, and to add, so like with the selecting your documentation source, this is also a really easy way to get started with InnerSource within the organization, because you can start getting collaboration across your organization from different people that are interested in, like, say, getting a repository set up to start InnerSourcing across teams. You can also, you might need to mix and match your documentation sources. So if you're using Confluence as like your main form of like documentation for internal projects or just internal information, you can still link out to, like, say, a template repository on GitHub that has READMEs that are set up, or other files that we're going to be talking about later that make it easier for people to start working within like a repository from like an InnerSource mindset. But it's just important to kind of use the tools that are at your disposal and making sure that you're leveraging each one for the strengths that they have, whether that's like Confluence or GitHub Pages, mixed with like template repositories within GitHub itself.
Yeah, and like you said, use the tools you have. So don't gate doing any of this because you lack, say, an internal chat tool or anything. Work with what you have and get the message out and figure out how you can collaborate. And maybe improving the communication is part of your mission or something. Let's see. Next, engineering blogs are a great way to get information out to the whole company. If you look at our GitHub blogs, we post new things that are happening and new goals that the company has. And doing similar things for InnerSource at your company is a great way to start. So write a blog that explains what InnerSource is and what it means to your company, and kind of talk about how you can get started. Invite people to your documentation so they can look through how you're going to get started, and teach users how they can get started building these repositories, opening them up, teach them how to get help, all sorts of things, kind of pique their interests so they're looking for more information, so you can kind of build your core group of people that are trying to open up your projects at your company.
Yeah, and definitely make sure that, like, when you're creating these blog posts, that you're continuing to like celebrate your wins. So like when InnerSource works within a repository or within a specific project, maybe you shipped faster or a new feature was added because of cross-team collaboration, making sure to highlight that, thanking the individuals or the teams that kind of helped out across like your landscape. Just making sure that people see that not only did this InnerSource initiative get kicked off, but it's also actually working. And it's also important to kind of share some of your losses. It's okay to admit that like something failed, but identify like where you're learning from that. So when you first start with InnerSource, maybe your cross-team collaboration is kind of clunky. Maybe your read and write permissions are completely skewed and messed up, and like you're having issues with that. But making sure to kind of identify like your missteps, and then how you're kind of changing that and how you're going to make it easier moving forward. A, to make sure that the conversation's still happening about InnerSource, but B, you're just kind of also celebrating the work that's being done within the organization, which is always a good thing, because as your organization scales, it becomes harder to find out what the different teams are working on, and then suddenly something ships and they had no idea that it, something new was coming out.
Let's see. So we'll talk about central communication channels. So here we're mostly talking about Slack or Teams or Gitter or any of those type of chat tools. If you have access to them and it's part of your company culture to communicate over them, then utilize that. Highlight your successes, talk about your failures, and you don't need to do this solely in an InnerSource channel. While that is probably a good place to do some of the communications, you want to kind of highlight these things across the organization so that you can get all of the people at your company to realize how InnerSource is helping you out. And that's also a great place to advertise your community of practice meetings. So you'll have these meetings, every couple of weeks or months, whatever makes sense for you. You'll want to advertise these so that you can get more people engaged when you're having them. And a very important one is standardize how you can get help at each with your projects. So if you have a ton of different projects inside your InnerSource push, it's very easy for new users to get lost. You want to kind of document a way for new projects and existing projects to help support their users. So repository discussions is a great place to do that. That was a newish feature that GitHub released a while ago, but if you want to have a chat channel for each project, that works just as well. Just have a spot where users can go to get help so they don't get stuck and they don't get lost. A FAQ is an option, but you need to make sure you keep it maintained. And you also want to make sure that it's real questions. Many of us have gone and looked at an FAQ with questions that you don't think anyone has ever asked. So if you do documentation that way, just make sure you update it.
Yeah, and before we move on to the next topic, I just wanted to highlight one of the comments made by Oleg. So he identified that it's important part, like one important part of building a community is finding champions in the target teams. That's kind of a talking point that we typically, when we're interacting with customers about their InnerSource journey, that's definitely one of the things that we bring up. I kind of liken it to finding the people that would stand in line for a new phone because they want to see like a new technology or see a new way of working be successful. Another thing that you can do is start looking for teams that would provide some quick wins, quote unquote. This is just something that maybe their team is relatively successful and it's maybe an application that's used internally by lots of different teams, kind of opening them up to the idea of InnerSource and having people, typically their users, kind of contribute with either issues or bug requests or bugs or feature requests. As well as just kind of highlighting, ways that they can use the rest of the company to kind of help build out, their specific application. But that was a really good point. Finding that internal champion on a team makes it a lot easier to make change. Because if you were on a team and someone just told you that you needed to change the way you worked, there'd be pushback. You'd drag your feet. But if you had someone within your own team that was saying like, this is a really good idea. This is going to really revolutionize the way that we're getting things done. It's going to make it quicker to ship. That's definitely a much easier path forward.
It looks like there's some questions about privacy as well. So I think from here, we were going to start looking at demos. So this might be a good spot. So if you look through here, I have internal repositories and private repositories and repositories with no identifier next to them. That means they're public. So internal in GitHub in an organization means that anyone in the organization can see it. So right now, just myself and one of my colleagues is part of this test organization. So they can see all of these, but they won't be able to see the private ones. And everyone in the world could get access to this one right here. And you can set that up in your, somewhere in here. It might be,
should be under member privileges.
Member privileges, thank you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, right here. And it looks like in this case, my enterprise has set it so that my organization can't do this, can't override it. So from here, I'd have to go to the enterprise and change it. But you can, disallow public, but allow everyone to create internal ones. So
yeah, and that just to really touch on that, the point. So the way that permissions work within GitHub Enterprise, either cloud or server, is that if an enterprise sets a specific rule, then the organizations themselves won't be able to override those specific rules. However, if the enterprise itself doesn't set the rule as, say, like a no policy, then the individual organizations can set those rules. So if you needed to set it up so that some orgs are able to create public repos while others can't, you would set that as a no policy at the enterprise level, and then you would have the organizations themselves maintain, what kind of repo creation individuals would have, as well as, what the base permission of read, write, no permission, etc. So Just depends on how you kind of want that to work out within your organizations.
All right, are we good to go through the demos?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, so this right here is a clone of the SAP InnerSource portal. We have a blog that Zach wrote a few weeks ago, I believe, that kind of highlighted this as one of the options. So this is super easy to set up. I cloned it and then set a new origin and pushed it to my test org. And then I set GitHub pages up to host it, since it's just a static website. If you have another portal that you'd like to use that could work just as well, this was just easy for me to do. So I just put this one as public. And if I drop that in chat there, everyone can go look if they desire. So basically what this does is it builds a InnerSource portal to view the repositories that are in this repos.json file. So if we look quickly, right now we have 2 repositories in here. You can view them as a grid or as a table. It gives you links to them themselves and talks about how active they are, what language they're using, helps you get to them. So this is one way of displaying your projects. Now, this itself is a static repository or a static website. So it is just working on these repos.json file. So I set up an action, which is poorly named, to use this InnerSource crawler. So let me get that. So this is a Python script that Zach wrote to generate the repos.json file. You can go through the code here if you wish. But basically, it will look through your organization for repositories that are tagged with InnerSource right here. So it looks like I've got 3 right now. So if you look, there should be a 3rd one here. I think we may be having some actions issues, but we'll add another one and see if we can get it to run. So I will add miniature train. I think you are empty. Yes. I was doing some automation testing, I believe, and that's why I've written my name a number of times there. So if we go here on the right to the About gear, and we type InnerSource as the topic, and I'll show you how to configure what it's actually looking for here in a moment. Then we go back to our action. So here we've cloned the repository. We've set up Python within our Ubuntu machine. We install the requirements from the crawler. So I think there's only 2. Yeah, the GitHub the GitHub library in Python and .env, which allows us to use environment variables from a file. We build the environment file, and this is where we are specifying both the org and the topic we're looking for. And I had to set a admin key for this one, but I believe that was so I could check in files to this org or to this repo. And from there, we just run the crawler and move the repo.json file to the right spot and check it in. So if you look, this is a workflow dispatch. Since this is just a test one, that works out great. But if you probably want this to be on a cron schedule. So if we go to actions, and we had some actions issues earlier today, so let's see if we can get it to run without complaining. And it'll get picked up here in a moment.
Within like a live demo to test the waters.
Yeah. I haven't actually checked if we're back up, so this could be interesting. Hey, we got picked up by a runner, so all is good. So this takes probably only a few seconds, 47 seconds roughly. So it should be done by the time we can get the logs even in here. So installing the dependencies. There we go, and we're done. So if I go back up here, the GitHub Actions bot just updated the repos.json file. And we have miniature train right there at the top. And hopefully we still have the others in here. Yeah, InnerSource portal, et cetera, et cetera. So from there, we just have to wait for pages to update. So this tells me that it's building. Since it saw there is an update to the repo, it's rebuilding this. And it might be done. So yeah, let's see. There we go. And now we have all 4 of them there. So it's as simple as running that crawler and hosting this SAP InnerSource portal. And you can get that set up. All right. You ready to demo yours, Beard?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're gonna do a quick screen shift. Sweet. All right. So I'm using something similar to the portal that Chris was just showing off. This is another repository written by a GitHub staff member called Enterprise Showcase. And this specific repository builds out kind of this repository collection of all of the repositories within all of your enterprise. So all of the organizations, all of the repos can be displayed. But one of the things that I like about this is the use of this item called collections, where we can kind of create a list of repositories that we are related to a specific form or function or whatever. So I have already forked this repository into a test org, my test corp, which is doing really well, obviously. And the only thing I've done so far is I've forked this repository over, and then I needed to create a GitHub action secret called like GH, what's it called? So I'm accurate.
GHEA token?
Yeah, I had to create a secret called GHEA token, and I just did that off screen. So I'm gonna get this thing set up and start running live. So let's fingers crossed on this one. So this is a forked repo. So the first thing I need to do is jump in and say like, yeah, I'm okay with my forked repo running GitHub Actions. So I can click this, and then I can jump into this generate repository list. And first I need to double check and make sure that there's that wonderful file. It's a good thing this is written in my README that tells me exactly what I need to modify. I had this all memorized. Oh, right, in the action file itself. So if I jump into my workflow, go into repo list, I just need to modify where it says enterprise name here. So I'm just gonna go in here and click on this, and if I'm not mistaken, my enterprise is avocado core. Double check. Yeah, that's what I thought. All right, so we'll just copy this over, jump into this file that I'm editing.
And it needs to be that slug versus the friendly name?
Yes. I have this finished in another repo, so I can double check after I commit this. But yeah, let's jump in there for in case things are broken, you can look at this thing. Yep. Okay, cool. All right, perfect. I know exactly what I'm doing, everyone. So I'm going to commit this real quick. And then write to main, didn't even create a pull request. So I'm living life dangerously. And then I'm just going to set this up to run on this workflow. And so this is going to do something similar to what Chris's did, where it kind of created a list of all of the repositories in all of the organizations across my enterprise. Just as a heads up, Avocado Core is kind of like an internal, or not internal, but a test org / enterprise that a lot of people at GitHub use. So the repository list that gets created from this is very messy. There's a lot of just like oddly named repositories with a lot of like random characters because people are just testing different features and functions as they kind of go around their day. So while this is generating a repository list, I'm actually going to jump in and modify a file because I want to create a new collection. And so this collection is actually going to identify repositories across different organizations within my enterprise. And I've got a code space already fired up and ready to go to modify this. So I'm just going to do some quick stuff here. So I'm just going to do, I'm going to switch to a new branch here. And we'll call this new collection. And then I just need to modify a file in my collections. And this one's called Cream. So we'll just modify this one since it already exists. So we'll just change the title here, and we can call this, InnerSource. And then I can give it a better description than cheese rules everything around me. So I can say like collection of handy InnerSource related repositories. And then I actually have my list of repositories in a window over here, so I can just drag and drop it in as opposed to watching me type. So I'm just gonna paste this in real quick. It's just quick. It's just two. We've got that didn't look right. No, yours is a dash here, right? Yeah. And then I forgot your organization name. What's your org?
Socrates Test Org. And the repo is InnerSource-portal.
Oh, that's what happened there. I apparently forgot to write things down. Right.
Yep.
And I actually need to do the same thing for my repo name. So we'll do Enterprise Showcase here. And then we can say something like a bunch of InnerSource repos. And then get super excited. So we'll throw a bunch of exclamation points. These are the best example repos ever. So then here I can jump in. Oh, that's right. I don't have, right. So we'll do git add, go git commit here. And add new collection. And then if I jump in, so here I can just do a git push. Yeah, it's going to tell me that I don't have an origin set up. So, per usual, got to do the old connecting dots. I could also be doing this in the UI. All of this can be done over here on this branch thing, which makes it actually a little bit easier because it'll even do your set upstream for you. But I apparently liked going the hard way. Technically, I could also create a pull request right from my code tab over here as well. But we'll jump in, create a pull request the old-fashioned way in the UI. And so this is just going to go back to main here as opposed to a contribution to the fork. So say add a new InnerSource collection. Want this creates new collection for InnerSource. We'll create this pull request. I don't have any branch protections or anything set up, so I'm just going to merge this blindly. Just cross my fingers and hope that it works, and then we'll just merge this in and see what happens. So now if I go to my actions, we're going to see that all of these things are going to start running. I'm going to let this run in the background. I'm going to jump back into our presentation because I'm just noticing the time, and then I'll come back and look at our website to see how this all looks once we've kind of gone through some more of the slides. But hopefully that was helpful. All right, so let's talk. So now that people are maybe discovering your repositories, let's talk about how you can make sure that not only do they find your repository, but then they can start actually using it and contributing to it. So we're going to kind of look at some of the different files and different things that you can do within your organization to kind of make these contributions happen. So the first and foremost is your README. So your README should kind of act as the welcome mat for your repository. It's the first thing that people are going to see outside of maybe like your laundry list of all the files that you have, depending on the size of your repo. And some of the things that we like to make sure that READMEs do is that they provide like a clear and concise message for what the repository is, what it does, and then providing things like instructions on how to get started, or even just linking to a getting started document, identifying where people can get help, whether that's an email, Slack channels, or team channels. Maybe you have a discussion within the repository itself, but making sure that people kind of identify how to get started and then also how to contribute. Typically, I kind of recommend if you are a new user or even a new employee on your team, what information would you need to get up and running on your repository? And that's the kind of information that you need to be providing to contributors from outside of your team. And then we've also identified that you can also use Codespaces. I just used Codespaces a second ago, but hopefully we'll have a little bit of time and I can talk about some of the other things you can do with Codespaces using dev environment settings so that everyone that uses your Codespace will automatically be set up for success, and they don't have to set up like a bunch of stuff locally to get up and running before they even create their first branch. So some README examples from across the internet. We've got Visual Studio Code, Atom, and then GitHub Docs. All kind of have different takes on the README. Both Visual Studio Code and Atom went super picture heavy to get your attention. They've got status badges letting you know that things are okay or maybe not okay depending on the repository. And then GitHub Docs kind of went for more of like a less loud at the beginning, but it has a lot of information about things like how to start contributing and different things about how to get started, what things they are looking for, what things they're not looking for, and that just makes it a lot easier for people to kind of find your repo and then get moving. Outside of the README file, we also have our Contributing.md. So this is kind of the blueprint for how you want people to suggest changes, identify bugs, maybe actually submitting a pull request. If your repository is broken up into a lot of different repositories, maybe you're running like submodules, you can actually identify how to contribute to those different files or how to contribute to those different repositories. An example of that for me is like the Atom repository is actually made up of, the Atom project is actually made up of a bunch of different repos, and they actually kind of create this image and then they identify all the different areas within like the UI on like where that repository actually lives, so you can actually contribute to the place that you want to make changes to. And so I've got some examples again of like how to contribute, whether it's Atom, VS Code, or GitHub Docs, which doesn't look great on, but yeah, white on white is difficult to read. So after we have our README files and our contributing files, or the Contributing.md rather, we also have template files. So if you aren't aware, you can use both issue templates and pull request templates to kind of guide your users on how to interact with either new features or bug identification, or even just creating a pull request from the get-go. So if we look at, say, the Atom feature, so this is a feature request on the Atom repository. One thing that I like about sharing this specific example is within the actual feature request template, they use comments to identify what they're looking for in specific sections. But if you were to look at this as like, plain text, or not plain text, but actually like formatted, it just looks like headings. You don't see any of these comments, so it keeps it really clean. But this just makes it so that if someone were to identify a new feature, they can identify, a summary, their motivation, and then, whatever other information you are looking for whenever someone creates a feature or a bug report. If you use another system outside of GitHub Issues to manage your projects, you could always create an issue template that directly links over to that specific board or tool. That way, if someone does create an issue within your repository, it's telling them like, hey, we don't use issues here. We, maybe we use Azure Boards or other tools. Please make that, create an issue over here instead. Then you also have pull request templates. So one difference between issue and pull request templates is that your repository can have multiple issue templates. So you can create different issue templates for different things, whether it's a feature, a bug, Internally, we use issues for all kinds of things. So asking for time off, maybe setting up like a new customer meeting. Like those are all issue templates that we have set up. So you can get pretty creative. Maybe you want to create like meeting notes and you want to be able to just create an issue that identifies like, the different areas of the meeting notes, like attendees, what was discussed, action items, etc. But with your pull request template, basically what happens here is that whenever someone creates a pull request within your repository, it's automatically going to kind of identify what information you're looking for. So for example, you might ask for a specific issue that it's closing. You could also identify specific steps that you want the contributor to make prior to them submitting this. So maybe you want to make sure that they've tested this locally before they've put it on you to review / test yourself. But those are two different ways that you can kind of guide your users. Well, 4 if we can count all the files. But there are a couple of different ways that we can kind of guide contributors from outside of our team to kind of alleviate that like initial, I have no idea what I'm doing in this repo, but I like using this project and I want to make it better. And kind of removing that makes it easier for people to contribute, and they'll want to come back and continue contributing as long as they have like a good relationship with whatever issue or pull request they've created within the repository. Outside of the repository itself, there are other ways that you can evangelize InnerSource within your organization, and that can be done through things like hackathons. So you can have maybe a specific day of the week, maybe like open source Fridays, but instead of open source, you're working on internal projects. You could do maybe like an event once a quarter or something, where you just kind of identify internal projects that you want people to begin working on. Or maybe it's a project that doesn't exist, but it's like an item that someone's always wanted to solve or fix, or maybe create something new for, and kind of creating a place for people to promote what projects they want to work on, and then people from across the organization can identify, hands up and say like, oh, I'd love to work on the docs for that, or I'd actually like to help develop that feature, or maybe looking at existing things, like maybe you've been InnerSourcing for 3 months or 6 months, and you feel like your documentation's a little stale or it needs to be updated. Those are all areas where we could kind of identify via the hackathon, like these are the projects that need help. Feel free to raise your hand and make some contributions across the organization. And then one thing that I like to kind of make clear when it comes to InnerSource within an organization or within an enterprise is that when someone contributes to your repository from across your org, you should consider them a paying user as opposed to an annoyance or someone who's just trying to like bug you because they're giving you more work, right? If you treat them like a paying customer, you are going to respond to them a little bit quicker. You're going to read their issue or their pull request as if it would change how much money you could be generating with your project. And this just creates a better relationship between the people that are coming to you and wanting to either create features or identifying bugs, and then your response time. And there are ways that you can kind of identify what your typical response might be, right? Like maybe for InnerSource contributions or contributions from outside of your team, you're only going to look at those on Wednesdays and Fridays. But if you're clear about that and identify it in either the README or your contributing guide, and just say that, we look at cross-team collaboration on the following days, so you can expect kind of a turnaround time of like 2 or 3 days on any kind of pull request or issue that you create. If you're upfront, it just makes it easier so that people don't feel like they're being ignored. Because if you create an issue in even like an open source project and no one responds to you, you're probably not going to go back. I mean, I'm sure you've asked a question on some like web forum, no one responded, or someone gave you like some off-the-cuff answer that just didn't do anything. You probably didn't go back, or you didn't identify that forum or that community as like the solution to your problem moving forward. And you don't want that to be the case, or the relationship that you start creating with the people in your organization, because you don't want to be the project that no one wants to help. And then, again, going back to Chris's topics on, either blog posts or chat channels, but making sure that you're identifying or advertising that your project needs help, whether that's going back to those blogs, going back to those channels, maybe identifying it within your repository topics. If we use something like Chris's portal, we can identify that it's looking for InnerSource needed, InnerSource wanted, help needed, and it could automatically scrape those repositories and build out a collection of repos that need help. And then, yeah, so we kind of talked about, I showed Codespaces. I didn't really talk about it. I just kind of like showed you a cool feature and was like, yeah, this is a thing. But Codespaces is essentially VS Code with a full development platform in the cloud. It enables you to work on your repository or someone else's repository with all of the different files and features within that specific repo. Similar to what I had going in my in my code space here. But one thing that I didn't show off in this specific code space is that we can actually set up a dev container file in the repository itself. So this dev container.json file actually defines what your dev environment is going to be for a specific code space. So whenever someone creates a code space within your specific repository, they'll actually be able to work exactly how you need them to work, or with whatever tools they'll need to be successful, without them having to do that locally. And this is going to help increase InnerSource contributions or cross-team contributions, because they don't have to get set up. It's not going to take them 30, 40 minutes just to get up and running before they can create that first branch or that first commit. They can actually just hit the VS or the Codespaces button, open up Codespaces, and get right to work. Create their branch, start making changes, create a pull request right from the web. And as the slide said, it's going to be GA this summer, and you can sign up for beta down at the bottom. And then now we're going to wrap it up. So Chris, do you have anything that you want to mention on any of the stuff that I kind of blew through?
I'm really excited about Codespaces and how that can help open source and InnerSource alike, helping people, like you said, get those dependencies installed quickly without having to fight with getting your environment set up. That's really gonna, I think, change things.
Oh yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, you could jump into a code space here. So I'll just create one really quickly off of this specific repository. And so while that's doing that, why don't I check on my action? All right, so we should have a website here. That's fun. That's what I like to see. Perfect.
Yeah.
Hard fail. Let's see if this is run. Yeah, it did.
Do we screw up the JSON somehow?
I don't think so.
Well, we didn't even edit the JSON, did we? That was generated.
Yeah. I mean, we've got repos, yeah, from all the Avo all over the place. Well, this is fun. Nothing like failing live on a Friday. This is a good start to the weekend. That's what I like to see. Well, all right. So I had a contingency for this, as we saw. So I have this repository that's finished. So I'll jump into this code. It's not loading. Huh. No bueno. That's not fun. Well,
demos are great.
Yeah, so it would look like this. It would be a long laundry list of all of the repositories that we have, because we have thousands in this thing, and then the collection would have the different repositories with their topics. Trust me, it works on my machine. Okay, so if I jump back into this specific thing, so let's see if I can't do an npm start, and then open this up in my browser. And so I have no idea what I'm doing with this specific project that I forked. I was able to create a code space for it. In the instructions, it says to run npm start, and now I have my working app. All in what, 30, 40 seconds, as opposed to like having to bring this down locally, clone it, and everything else. So yeah, it's very cool. I like it a lot. I'm looking forward to it being available broadly and people to be able to work in it. All right. So yeah, just wrapping up. Discovering repos is hard. So make it a little bit easier, whether it's through either of the portals that Chris or I pretended to share, or find other methods. The two solutions that we provided aren't necessarily the only answers, but making sure that whether it's user permissions, showcases, or even just having some form of list of repositories that people can help out on, or should be collaborating on, is definitely a good start for your InnerSource journey. Some technology that can help are some of the features that we covered on GitHub itself. So specific files, user permissions within the organization or the enterprise, as well as things like Codespaces. Things that we didn't touch on are things like GitHub projects, GitHub discussion or repository discussions. And then any other tech that you can think of that could help with InnerSource?
It's really, in my opinion, a cultural change. Like you can get InnerSource going without any of this stuff. You just have to really want to and help your organization get into it. So all this stuff is very helpful, but you really got to talk to your teammates at your businesses and your organizations and learn how to share your code. And it's a very hard first step.
Yeah, absolutely. And then finally, just building a culture of sharing. The biggest thing is being comfortable sharing your code. A lot of people that we talk to about InnerSource, they kind of hem and haw, and they have this idea of like, well, the repository's not ready, the code's not ready to be shared yet. Nobody's code is perfect. It's okay if your code's a little messy. Maybe your code comments are terrible. Maybe you don't do code comments. Maybe you've got a lot of open issues that you still need to deal with. It's all right. Other teams within your organization most likely have the exact same problems. They're not going to think it's odd that you have 4 pull requests and all of the tests are failing. So it's all right. Share it, get your repository out there, make it so other people can consume it and use it, and then make it easier for them to get their project shipped. Because maybe they're not contributing to you, but they're consuming it, and that's making it a lot easier for them to ship quicker as well, which is also a win for your team as well. And then, as Chris mentioned, technology isn't necessarily the only thing that you need for InnerSource to work. Actually, it isn't. It's definitely a cultural thing. But utilizing the technology that you have thoughtfully to get this thing up and running is definitely a major key to success. And then, again, just a quick reminder that if you would like to book a demo with anyone from our professional services or field services teams, feel free to just take a quick pic of that QR code, and it'll get you all set up for success. Who knows, maybe you'll get a meeting with either Chris or myself. You'll probably want Chris because he had his things together today, and my demo was a hot mess. Or maybe you'll get me, and I'll be a little bit better on that specific day.
That's how things go when you're trying to do it live.
Oh, absolutely. I knew. I woke up this morning, I'm like, it's not going to work. It's going to feel real good. Let's see if this works. Yeah, hard pass, it says.
When we had that actions outage a little while ago, I was prepping the demo and I was panicking. Oh boy, it's going to go badly.
Hey, listen, at least I have a description and topics, right? I'm ready, right?
Yeah.
Half the battle.
I do see some questions in here about point and click for pipelines and READMEs. So somewhere in here, Beard did show that you can edit all this stuff live, or you can edit all this stuff through the browser. So if you have edit or push permission on repos, when you click on a file, there's a pencil icon that you can click on and make your commits through the UI. So assuming that's what we're talking about, you can definitely do that. And it does make updating documentation very quickly, often.
Oh, okay. Okay. I wonder if that's more... That might be more specific to creating GitHub actions. So kind of like a drag and drop / like drop down list.
Okay. We do have the workflow templates, but that's not really the same.
Yeah, I know that actions is constantly being modified / enhanced. I wouldn't be surprised, and I wouldn't be surprised if features like that are potentially done. I have no idea if that's going to happen, but I could see that being like a next evolution of actions to make it make it easier for people to get started with your first pipeline kind of adventure, right? So that would be very cool. Make it a lot easier for people to get started. I know that we have workflow files and templates, and that definitely helps. And then I do find that when I use actions, that I'm drawn to the actions on our marketplace that have like a well done README with a good example of how to get this thing up and running, so that I can get started with an action as opposed to like trying to figure out how exactly I'm going to use this thing. But visually, it'd be really nice too. I agree. All right, and then was there anything else that we saw that looked really awesome?
We did, I think we put it in chat, but we have a repository with all of these links that we'll share out. So that should get you to the documentation here, as well as these open source portals that we were showing off. Let's see. I think that might be it, Beard.
Sweet. Well, I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day, or maybe it's already evening. So I hope you have a good start for your weekend. Thanks for including us in your weekend plans. So yeah, I hope you have a great day, and I hope you have a great weekend as well.